Good morning, everybody. Can you please have a seat? We're running a little late, so we want to get started. My name is Susan Wayne, and I'm President and CEO of Family Services of Westchester. I am pleased to welcome you as the President of the Board for Nonprofit Westchester to what promises to be a lively and topical conversation with our two candidates for the office of Westchester County Executive. A special thanks also goes to Pace Law School for hosting and Pace Women's Justice Center for co-sponsoring this event. Thank you very much. Before I introduce our first candidate, I'd like to take this opportunity to share a little bit about Nonprofit Westchester. We were founded in 2012. Our founding nonprofit sponsors are ANDRAS, Mental Health Association of Westchester, Collaborative for Palliative Care, Northern Westchester Hospital, Phelps Memorial Hospital Center, and Westchester Jewish Community Services. Our founding business sponsors include Clarfield Financial Advisors, Chubb & Son, Dorff & Nelson, KeyBank, O'Connor Davies, the Rollins Agency, and the Westchester County Association. We currently have 83 members. We're hoping at the end of this day that we'll have more. All types and all sizes of nonprofits throughout Westchester County. We have a cooperative mission to learn, advocate, and collaborate, as well as to strengthen the capacity, impact, and visibility of the nonprofit sector in Westchester County for a more just and caring community. We provide a single unified voice for Westchester's nonprofit community. We focus on sharing resources, connections, and information to strengthen Westchester in partnership with public and private sectors. Our organizations employ 20% of the county's total workforce and contribute $23.5 billion to Westchester's economy. In other words, our partnership is powerful, strong, and united. Here's an overview of how today's program will flow. Each of our guests will be asked a series of now 9 questions and be given 3 minutes to respond to each. We will be timing them. The questions will be asked by pre-selected representatives of Westchester's nonprofit community. We selected the questions based on the most current and important issues facing Westchester's nonprofits today, including housing, healthcare, the environment, the economy, childcare, seniors, education, partnerships, arts, tourism, and general services. At the conclusion of 30 minutes, each guest will have an opportunity for a 3-minute closing statement. This will not be a debate. We will ask each candidate the same set of questions, and each one in turn will have their own 30-minute segment to respond. It is important for all of you to know that we will feature a full videotape of today's program on our Nonprofit Westchester website. That's npwestchester.org. So please be sure to share with your colleagues the fact that they can see what you all witnessed today, even if they could not be here. Also, please share your thoughts and questions with us on our website about today's program, and we will share these comments with the candidates. We want to be a forum and resource for all of our members. We are also tweeting live from here today, #NPCE Forum. But on that note, and in the spirit of keeping this fair to both candidates, we ask all of you attending to forego sharing any questions or answers electronically during the event, during Mr. Astorino's session. We are confident that this group of professionals will comply with this request. To set the stage, and given the current environment, nonprofits are facing enormous challenges. As we all know, the government shut down earlier this week. Sequestration implemented earlier this year, and these are just a few examples. The people who are the hardest hit are often those with the greatest need. These are common issues confronting nonprofits as demand for services continues to increase. We hope today's program will shed some light on how each candidate will stand on these critical issues facing our county. With that said, it is my pleasure to introduce our first guest today. Rob Astorino was elected county executive in November 2009. Before taking office as county executive, Rob had a long and successful career in the radio industry. He was first elected to public office at the age of 21, serving as a member of the Mount Pleasant Board of Education. Following that, he served 12 years as a councilman on the Mount Pleasant Town Board. In 2003, he was elected to the Westchester County Board of Legislators. Rob is a lifelong resident of Westchester, residing in Mount Pleasant, where he and his wife Sheila are raising 3 young children. It is my pleasure to introduce County Exec Robert Astorino.
Good morning. Just wanted to say hello. Sorry about the late start. I had a commitment many months ago up at the Hudson Valley Chamber in Yorktown, and so that started at 8 this morning with a little breakfast and didn't get out of there until about 8:50, and don't do the math and the mileage on the Taconic State Parkway, but we made it here. Anyway, thank you for letting me come. I appreciate the opportunity. It has been a very interesting 4 years. It's gone so quick. I can't believe it's here. But in that time, I have met an amazing amount of people that do amazing things, including everyone in this room. And I know when we first came in, we were dealt with really what everyone was going through in this country, of course, but this county in particular had a very deep hole, a $166 million deficit, which to climb out of takes a lot of hard work. And we needed a lot of partnership in that because we had some very difficult decisions to make. And I understand how important the nonprofit sector is in this county. My wife worked for Westchester ARC. She has a degree in special education. She's a speech therapist. So she has been involved and will go back to work. She said our little one, Ashlyn, who is turning 8, oh geez, no. She's turning 4 on the 8th. So in a couple of days, and of course every minute over the last month we've been asking, is my birthday yet? Is my birthday yet? So in about a year, my wife is going back into the workforce. And it is a little bit of a different workforce than it was, I think, 4 years ago when she was in. We've all had to confront these challenges. And I think what I would say is a thank you. Thank you for being a partner with us to help make some of those important, critical, and difficult decisions, whether it was in our conference room many, many times or in your offices, one-on-one. You know, we could not have gotten out of this without your help, so I appreciate that. So I look forward to saying what we've done, where we're going, and talking about some specifics. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Amy Cohn. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Mental Health Association of Westchester, a proud resident of Croton-on-Hudson. Our first question is, as you know,
yes,
the nonprofit sector fills an important role in Westchester. We're on the front lines of responding to the needs of children, families, seniors, protecting our environment, keeping our population healthy, educating the next generation, and addressing issues related to immigration. We ask you how you will strengthen and expand existing partnerships with the not-for-profit sector.
Well, I think we've done that in many ways, and I think, Amy, you're a perfect exhibit of what we've done and how we've had to change because of the dilemmas that we faced. The mental health community is a perfect example, where Westchester County was one of the last counties in all of New York State to still provide direct mental health services and clinics, where we are supposed to oversee that as well. So not only did we feel it was a conflict, but we felt there were agencies that could do it, quite frankly, better than we could and more efficiently than we could. So as some other communities are now grappling with how to deal with this, and many have already gotten out of it, we decided the mental health clinics that we were running could be done better if we weren't involved directly. And so we partnered with the mental health community. And in the case of Mount Kisco, for instance, there were basically 3 clinics there. county, state, and a private or nonprofit. And we felt that we could transition all the patients that were under our care, and until we had a successful transition, which was overseen by the state, and every patient had a transition and was successfully with their new doctors, that we could do that, and we did. Now, I know there was some pushback from legislators, there was some pushback in the community, and there was some nervousness that the care was not going to be there for them. But we were never going to let anybody leave our custody and care until they were successfully with a doctor and in the clinic. And so the nonprofit, we think, does it better. We think they do it much more efficiently than we can. And one of the biggest problems that we have is just the system here in New York, that with pensions and health care and everything else, some of which you're dealing with, but some of which you don't, like the pensions that we're stuck with. And when I say stuck, I mean in the system that it is, and the overwhelming number of increases that we get every year, that really limits our ability without raising taxes tremendously every year. So I think that's a perfect example of providing the care, providing the service. The nonprofits can do it better, in my opinion. They now have more access to what they do and more income, and we're out of that in something that we shouldn't have done. Now, that was a decision that I made, and I think it was one that turned out to be well. It turned out to be real good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Carola Bracco, and I'm the Executive Director of Neighbors Link in Mount Kisco.
Will we be in?
And also a resident of Mount Kisco. So our question to you is, studies have shown that the nonprofit sector contributes $23.5 billion to Westchester's economy and employs 20% of the county's workforce. What specific actions would you take to support and strengthen nonprofits as viable businesses?
Well, I will say this. Nonprofit sector is extraordinarily important to county government because of the many partnerships that we have. In the Department of Social Services alone, just that one department, we have, I believe, it is $83 million in contracts with over 110 agencies directly involved with our Department of Social Services. Now, that could be either the county will do it or the county will contract out to do it. We've decided, and this isn't just me, this was the county executives before me as well, that we should have nonprofit agencies handle it wherever we can. And I have said that believe me, to the consternation of our unions who feel that we should do everything. I have said where we can outsource or where a nonprofit or a for-profit can do it better and more efficiently, I don't think the taxpayer cares. If the service is being provided and done right, then whoever and in competition will do it. And in the case of you or some of the other nonprofits, we feel very strongly. Some of the Hispanic organizations that that you didn't mention by name, but we have good partnerships with for immigrant services, Hudson Valley Legal Services. We have added to the budget this past year because we felt very strongly about immigrant services, and they're now providing that for the first time in a Peekskill office, as well as domestic violence, and some of our partners are here, I know about that. So a dollar is still a dollar. We have to figure out, just as you do every day, because you sometimes have it worse with this, because you have smaller staffs and fixed costs. But the contract work group that we started, I think, has been very successful. And this was where everybody sort of got in the room. Dr. Grant Mitchell was appointed by me to be the liaison directly to the nonprofits because he worked with them, and we wanted to figure out if the money was going to stay the same or if it was going to be reduced, how do we make it better and easier for nonprofits? And I think out of this came something very, very good. And from the direct feedback that I've gotten and indirect feedback, it's working. So the contracts that you have had to do with the county and the invoices could take forever, and we're very redundant. And that takes time and effort on your behalf. So we're trying to reduce that, make it more efficient, so you could actually be freed up to do what you're supposed to do. 30 seconds.
Hello, I'm Brian Skanes,
Hi, Brian.
Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Club in Northern Westchester, located in Mount Kisco, and I also live in Mount Kisco. And you just answered my question.
Perfect. Next.
So I'm going to pass it on.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Well, let me say something about the Boys and Girls Club, because Sheila, my wife, worked there. And all three of our kids, including my little one now, is learning how to swim, or I learned how to swim at the Boys and Girls Club. So you have a great place. Thank you.
Hi,
How
I'm
are you?
Cora Greenberg,
Hi, Cora.
the Executive Director of the Westchester Children's Association. I live in Pleasantville. Many of the people who work in the nonprofit and public sectors in Westchester cannot afford to live here. The HUD settlement has been a big topic of conversation, but we'd like to move beyond that and speak about housing in a broader context. Outside of the HUD settlement, what do you see as the county's role in funding affordable housing in Westchester County?
It's an important role. It's one that the county has been doing for many years and is doing now under my administration and will do for the next 4 years and beyond, whoever's here after me. It's something that is important. I believe very strongly in affordable housing in many different ways with different options. Under New York State, as you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, it is a home rule state, and so all the land use regulations come under the local municipality. The HUD settlement does have an effect on what we do because we are restrained to the 750 units that we have to build over the 7 years with $51 million that we have to spend. So that money, if that money was not under the auspices of the specific guidelines to what and where we can build, that money would be freed up for other stuff. It's not to say we're not doing, but we have to be really judicious now because most of that money, if not all, has to go towards complying with the settlement. And by the way, we are well ahead of schedule now. We have 395 of the 750 that are done or in the process of being done, that are approved. And our goal, our target per the settlement, was 300 by the end of this year. So we are well ahead of schedule. We will very soon pass next year's goal for the settlement. So when the settlement ends, we'll still continue to build affordable housing. We've been doing that with projects in White Plains. We just had a big one that I signed that will go towards a redevelopment area for new affordable housing. We also had one in Yonkers, and we'll continue to do that. But the settlement is, unfortunately, a part of what we can do because there's only so much money that can go around. And first and foremost, we must comply with that because if we don't meet the monthly, yearly targets, we get significantly fined each month. So we can't get anywhere near non-compliance, and fortunately, we have complied with every step of that. Janet.
I'm Janet Langsam. I'm CEO of Arts Westchester, and I live in Armonk. And I know you're expecting a question about the arts, but we're going to disappoint you. Research shows that the years from birth to age 5 are a critical window for cognitive learning and the acquisition of key social skills linked to success in school and work. What do you see as the role of county government in the availability of affordable quality early learning and after-school options for our children, youth, and parents?
A couple of things. Our early intervention programs are important to us, and we spend a lot of money on EI programs for those who are in pre-K. We also, of course, do after-school programs through our Youth Bureau. Our Youth Bureau has, I think, done a very good job working directly with cities and communities and also working with many nonprofits. And one of the things that we have done through the Youth Bureau, we actually took the example because we thought it was a good one, and that we moved into the contract reform group, and now everyone is hopefully going to be on this. But through the Youth Bureau, we had 3-year contracts. And we've been doing this now with the domestic violence groups, and we'll hopefully do this with every group, that there can be stability in contracts, so not every year you don't know what you're going to get. Every year we go through, let's face it, the circus at budget time where everyone is there and everyone's wondering, and that's not good for anybody. And it's also good for the county, so we have 3-year stability in the budgets. So I think that is something that was worked on because it was something that was important to you, and you saw that as a big flaw in the system that we currently had. So we worked very hard to change that. As of today, it actually just went up. I just asked. This portal is now available, and we're testing it, and it should be readily available real soon. That's the repository. for everyone to have your documents on. So you don't need to redo everything every year. If the signature's on file, it's on file. You don't have to go back and do it again. You don't have to do triplicates. It's all there. So I think that's something that really worked out. So what I'm saying is we have had a real strong commitment in our Youth Bureau directly for after-school programs, for school programs. And this is sort of a balancing act because a lot of this is directly related to school districts. And we come in and supplement some of the things that the municipalities are doing. We've done things in Mount Vernon and the inner cities, and we've done things, quite frankly, with some of our towns and villages, too. We'll continue to do that. There's no question about it. Yes, sir.
Good morning.
I can't believe you didn't ask about the arts.
It will come.
You're throwing me a curveball here.
I'm Bob Miller. I'm
Bob,
president
yep.
of West Ave. We're county-wide. We're currently based in Yonkers, and I live in White Plains. You've already addressed this question as well, but you may want to expand on it. Healthcare is a hot topic these days with the rollout of the healthcare marketplaces. With all the changes, there are still mandates for the county to deliver certain public health services. What's your position on delivering mandated public health services via county-operated clinics or versus nonprofit community partners?
Well, that which is mandated we have to do and we will do. And the problem is the state mandates are gobbling up a lot of the budget. And yesterday Governor Cuomo was in Manhattanville College to announce that he's appointed a commission headed by Governor Pataki and former Comptroller McCall to look at property taxes because he called it a scourge in this state. And in many ways, obviously it is. You're all residents here, so you know what you pay in property taxes. And there's a reason why we've had 1.5 million people leave New York State in the last decade. Nobody can keep up with it anymore. So that's the balance that I've had to deal with in trying to continue to fund programs that we all feel are important, as well as balance the needs and what people can afford, like seniors and everybody else. And that's the hardest part, believe me. I would love to say yes to everyone. I would love to keep everything as it has been in the past. But dealing with the deficit that we had, it just was not possible for that period of time, especially. So the partnership has been very important to me because I think we've both gotten to know each other better, understand each other better, been very honest in direct conversations, and that's been helpful. And where we could make changes and move things around, we've been able to do that. Even things that weren't in the budget, we've been able to fund this year by shifting priorities and moving things, and we'll continue to do that. But with regard to the health services, there are things that the county must do, and our Department of Health is in charge of public health, prevention of some of the diseases that go around, and to isolate and locate. I mean, the public health part of what we do is mandated and it's important. You mentioned, I think, the healthcare clinics. We, as myself in our budget and the Board of Legislators with Democrats and Republicans, and this was something Andy Spano also took out of the budget, which was put back by the legislature but took out, and that was the neighborhood health centers. Now, they do a great job, and I visited them. I went to Open Door. They do a great job. The problem was we didn't have the $2.5 million anymore to give them. And fortunately, and this is actually a good thing, they're good. They're surplus in their budget. So they're healthy. And they have different avenues, including from the Affordable Care Act, to get more income from the federal government. We didn't have that. We had a deficit, and we had a mandate for our own public health through our health department. And so there was a difference in what we do and what we could give, and that's the reason why we could not give to the neighborhood health centers anymore. And their role is important, and we'll continue to send people to them that need their services for preventative care. But for what we do, we have a specific mandate under public health laws.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Hallis. I'm Executive Director of the Child Care Council of Westchester, and I'm from the great city of White Plains. And I have the arts question. Research shows that in addition to the benefits to education, youth development, healthy lifestyles, and tourism, the arts had an economic impact in Westchester of $156 million in 2010, up from $120 million 5 years earlier. Research also shows the arts supported 4,800 jobs in Westchester in 2010, up from 3,779 5 years earlier. What would you do to make sure that this arts industry continues to grow?
I keep meeting with Janet. And Janet's been great. You know, we, again, just like, 2010 was probably the roughest year I've had to deal with because we were just, we were just getting in, number one. And my gift was a housing settlement and a huge deficit on January 1st, 2010. So to deal with that was not always easy. But I think through our discussions, we've been able to stabilize things. I can say that as we work through our budget now, and believe it or not, we are now knee-deep in our budget for next year, because of the actions that we took, because of your help, by the way, and partnership in reworking things, we've stabilized the ship in many ways. And so looking forward, at least in next year and in the coming years, we do not see any major reductions in any areas. And we feel very strongly that we're basically now on the right direction. And I've told a lot of people here privately who've been calling us up and asking for next year and what it looks like. The arts is extraordinarily important. We are very proud of that partnership. And in the case of Westchester, it is very much a part of our tourism. Our tourism, you mentioned that, is exploding. We went and decided to have a campaign called Meet Me in Westchester. And it's been very, very effective. We are now drawing people from that 250-mile radius that really never gave Westchester a thought. They've heard of Westchester, but they never would come here, not for a weekend or so. But we have, in a very systematic way, looked at some national publications, some online, some television, radio. And I think of myself as a father, where, what are we going to do with the kids? Or what's a getaway weekend? And I have one quick story. My wife and I were dressed up one night as we were leaving the house. I was in a tuxedo, she was in a gown, and we were ready to leave. And my kids, we have 10, 8, and 4, and my kids said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Mommy and Daddy are going to one of the nicest hotels in the world." And they said, "You're going to the Great Wolf Lodge?" Well, the Great Wolf Lodge is about 100 miles from here. And if we could drive to the Great Wolf Lodge to have a weekend with the kids, then why can't people in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, etc., come to Westchester? Well, they are now, because we're advertising, and that helps everybody. That helps the arts, and because we promote that very, we intensify what we're doing with the arts through our tourism. We promote Kikit and all of our wonderful places, as well as our own, like parks, that are a big draw, and just the natural beauty, and our hotels. So I think it's worked very well. The numbers prove it's worked well. So the more people we can bring in here, the more revenue we can generate.
Good morning. My name is Judy Dobroff. I'm the Executive Director of Cancer Support Team, and I live in Mamaroneck. With the shutdown of the federal government, many Americans are dismayed at the inability of our elected officials to reach across party lines and serve the best interests of the people. Similar allegations have been made in Westchester. What will you do to ensure that all voices are heard and to avoid political gridlock in our community?
I think all voices have been heard. It's been very important to me personally, and I wanted this to filter down into every part of our administration, that we're going to be extraordinarily accessible. We're going to be sitting down with people, and I have, one-on-one. Our administration has, with the Women's Agenda, with the Child Care Council. We just want everyone to be treated like adults, let you know what we're dealing with, let us understand your concerns and challenges, and we understand those. And we've been able to meet some of those, not always financial, because we haven't been in the position to do so, but I think we've been very fair. And so for me, we are always going to talk to everybody, because that's not just who I am, but that's what I very strongly believe in. And unlike Washington, D.C., we have budgets that have been passed bipartisan. With some of the screaming, yelling. 2 years ago, the budget was 17-0. Last year, Democrats and Republicans got together and figured out a compromise, and we worked on that 24 hours straight. So I have always been willing to reach out. There are some things that are important, but I can compromise without compromising, and I've said the same thing to to Democrats or others who disagree with me. Sometimes it's Republicans who disagree. But that we can find common ground and work towards a middle and get it done. And I think that's what people expect. Not always will people be thrilled and happy with the outcome. Neither have I with some of the things that we've done in the budget. But we work through them. And ultimately, we can shake hands and agree. Sometimes agree to move forward, sometimes agree to disagree. But I think we have to have that common respect first.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your visions.
Is that it? That was 9 questions?
It was 9 questions. Oh, it was 8 questions, right.
8? We don't
But
get... Right.
you get to do 3 minutes of closing statements. Thank you.
I do want to mention one thing, because it was mentioned last night in our debate. I think it was alluded to here with childcare. This is an interesting thing, and it's been a challenge, but I think we have, again, reached a compromise that both sides win. Now, both sides are taxpayers, because we're trying to balance what they can afford, as well as child care agencies and the parents. We in this county, as I've said, are very generous in what we do, and we'll continue to do that. We don't have to do that. Our decision could have been, let's just cut it out, and only the temporary assistance that we receive from the federal government is what we'll use. We don't do that. But we also needed to bring a little balance to what we could afford. And so the compromise that was reached with Democrats is something that we feel very strongly. We're not going to raise it past 27%. We've said that once we got to this point, we're stable. We feel very strongly. 593 slots were added because we did this, and we felt, and I feel, that parents should, if they can, be able to put a little more for their children in. Now, I heard the other night it said that, well, what difference does it make if you added 593 slots and they're empty? Well, they're not. Every year and every month, we have had an increase in the number of applications and the number of children going into qualified daycare care. So people can say what they want, but that's just not true. We put a lot of money into it. We have not rejected anybody. We've not thrown anybody out. So by increasing those slots, 593 more families can take advantage of this, and they are doing that. August, we had a huge increase. And the effect took place in March. And since then, every month, increase in the number of children going into the programs. So it is working. It did what it was supposed to do. It stabilized the program financially. More parents are able to take advantage of it. Now, there are always going to be bumps along the road. And when they happen, the first thing that we ask and that we do is to communicate. That's how we'll get through all of this stuff together. So I want to say thank you in a real way. I want to say thank you for your partnership in these 4 years, especially during some very difficult times. I think we've gotten through it together, and we'll get through it again over the next 4 years. But I appreciate all that you do for Westchester. The nonprofits are extraordinarily important. I recognize that. That's why we continue those partnerships, and that's why we hand them off totally when they're really more appropriate than us doing them. So thank you for doing what you do for the people of this county. Enjoy your day.
You know what? We're just checking to see if Noam's here. Part of the rules were that he was not going to be able to hear the questions that we posed to Rob Astorino, so we're getting him from his seclusion. I have a, no. We also
Water.
have water for you. Okay, thank you, everyone. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our next guest. Noam Bramson has served as the mayor of New Rochelle since January 2006 and was re-elected most recently in 2011. Prior to becoming mayor, Noam served for 10 years on the New Rochelle City Council as a longtime aide to Congresswoman Nita Lowey. Noam assisted her efforts on both local and national priorities. Noam is a lifelong Westchester resident and a product of the New Rochelle public school system. Noam lives with his wife Katie and their two sons, Jeremy and Owen, who both attend New Rochelle Public Schools. It is my pleasure to introduce the Mayor of New Rochelle and candidate for Westchester County Executive, Noam Bramson.
Thank you. Thank you. Susan, thank you very much for the introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, it's really a pleasure to be with you. I'm sort of looking around the room and seeing lots of friendly and familiar faces, many people with whom I've had the pleasure of working over the years, and also others who I'm meeting tonight, rather this morning. I'm losing track of the hours and days. What day is today? Some I'm meeting today for the first time. But I want you to know how much I admire and value the extraordinary work that's done by not-for-profits throughout Westchester County every single day. I know of the thousands and thousands of individuals and families whose lives you touch, and I think it's really constructive that an effort has been formed to now bring all of the not-for-profits under an umbrella so that you can share information and collaborate and understand common interests and be stronger advocates for the proper changes at the regional level and at the state level. And I'm looking forward to strengthening the partnerships that we've already enjoyed in years past. And look, I'll begin in a very general way because I know the questions will get into some specifics. And I'll share with you how it is that I approach human service challenges at a very basic level. I think we're all in this together. We have a stake in each other's lives. We're all best off when every one of our neighbors has a meaningful opportunity to achieve their potential. And the best kinds of programs enable people who are able to achieve independence and self-sufficiency so they can stand on their own 2 feet and support their families and communities and contribute to the common good. And for those who, for whatever reason, are not able to attain those standards, the best kinds of programs provide for dignity and support and inclusion in the larger family of Westchester and the larger family of America. And I think that philosophical approach informs what we do, whether in government or in the not-for-profit world. And I would make the case that what I've just articulated is quite different from the philosophy that's been evident over the last 4 years, and that those differences play out in county policymaking in any number of different ways. So I'm not someone who thinks the government can or should do everything, nor am I someone who thinks that the government needs to or should retreat from all obligations. In many cases, it's a true partnership between the public and private sector that can best deliver the services that we want. And there is a distinction between partnering on the one hand, and on the other hand, dumping responsibilities on to the not-for-profit world. And I think drawing a line between those two is essential if we're going to make intelligent choices about what our competing responsibilities and common responsibilities ought to be. So let me leave it at that. I see the 30-second mark. I want to adhere to the time limits, and it's much more interesting for us to have a conversation than it is for me to talk at you. So I'm ready for your questions.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Amy Cohn. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Mental Health Association of Westchester and a resident of Croton-on-Hudson. Our first question is the following. As you know, the nonprofit sector fills an important role in Westchester. We're on the front lines of responding to the needs of children, families, and seniors, protecting our environment, keeping our population healthy, educating the next generation, and supporting immigration issues. How will you strengthen and expand existing partnerships with the not-for-profit sector?
Well, it's a great question, and I think we can look at this on a couple of levels. One has to do with the level of consultation that we engage in on a regular basis and on a structured basis. And so I would look to have regular discussions with many of you on an individual basis and with this organization on a collective basis in order to be constantly examining the kinds of things we do together and critically making determinations about what we can do better, what we can do in a different fashion. So I would look for your input in terms of how our partnerships could be strengthened. I think we can be doing a better job of competing alongside each other for resources and grants that come from the state and federal level. I think the county can be a big form of assistance in that regard. I think the contracting process can be improved and streamlined so that we're less worried about paperwork and more worried about service delivery. I think we can be thinking about rational allocation of county resources and figuring out how can we get the best bang for the buck. And you know, too often I think choices about county resources and how we allocate them for human services do not carefully enough examine the true costs and benefits society-wide. And that results in poor decision-making, which may seem to achieve a savings in the short term, but which in fact expand costs in the long term. And so working with each of you to make sure we have the right metrics for judging what a dollar spent here will achieve in terms of savings or additional needs there, I think is critically important. So it's got to be an ongoing dialogue, and that's the spirit in which I'd approach it.
I'm Carola Bracco, and I'm the Executive Director of Neighbors Link, Northern Westchester, and we're located in Mount Kisco, and I also live in Mount Kisco. Our question is, studies have shown that the nonprofit sector contributes $23.5 billion to Westchester's economy and employs 20% of the county's workforce. What specific actions would you take to support and strengthen nonprofits as viable businesses?
Okay. Well, I think in part it relates to the prior question and how we allocate government resources and whether we're making the proper investments in the work of not-for-profits so that you each can discharge your missions and do so in a way that's consistent with our public responsibilities. But it also raises, I think, broader planning questions which impact all businesses and all workers in Westchester County. When I speak to business leaders and ask them what's it going to take to find a spot in Westchester, one of the first things people ask me is, where are my employees going to live and how are they going to get to work? And that illustrates the degree to which a good development policy, a good policy for not-for-profits, a good business policy really rests on a solid foundation of planning. Do we have the skills that can seize the jobs of the future and serve as magnets of those jobs? Are we taking care of the infrastructure that can unlock the economic potential of particular locations? Are we looking at land use characteristics that can provide for growth in the appropriate areas? And maybe most directly important to this, do we have a sensible, affordable housing policy so that there are decent homes that are available to the younger professionals who very often are not-for-profit workers and are in the same boat as cops and teachers and civil servants and firefighters, people who do essential work in our region are often priced out of the region. So I regard all of these as kind of a piece. And if we have a sensible housing policy, a sensible planning policy, and a rational allocation of resources, then I think we'll have a more vibrant not-for-profit sector that's able to deliver all these services that we want and expect and need.
Morning.
Morning.
I'm Brian Skanes. I'm the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club in Mount Kisco, New York, and I also live there. I didn't ask this question earlier because Rob had addressed it twice in the first two answers, so it's going to be interesting for us to hear to see what you have to say.
Okay.
But as you know, the approval and payment process for Westchester County contracts is labor-intensive and lengthy, often requiring the cash-strapped nonprofits provide service for months without a signed contract or payment, frequently requiring them to secure loans to cover expenses. What are you going to do to make that better for us?
Let's fix it. I mean, I presume each of you, having wrestled with it day to day, have a clear understanding of what needs to change. And this is the kind of bureaucratic nonsense that drives me crazy and that gives government a bad name. I tell folks on my side of the aisle, Democrats, we're the ones who believe in public action. We're the ones who think that government has responsibilities. And therefore, it's on us to prove that government can do things well and efficiently. And when we have procedures of that kind that are nothing but a frustration to the people involved, that, as you pointed out, result in actual monetary outlays that many cash-strapped organizations can't afford, and that don't serve any legitimate public purpose, we've got an obligation to solve it. And it should be an easy thing to solve. Process matters. I mean, I'm a big believer in setting goals and standards and having metrics for success and making sure that everyone in your employ knows what those standards are, making sure that those standards are transparent so the public can hold us accountable, and the speed and efficiency with which we process agreements and contracts is one of those metrics that can be established clearly for every department. And that would encourage the kind of creative change that is necessary in order to get a better outcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Cora Greenberg. I'm the executive director of the Westchester Children's Association, and I live in Pleasantville. As you mentioned, many of the people who work in the nonprofit and public sectors in Westchester cannot afford to live here. The HUD settlement has been a big topic of conversation, but we'd like to move beyond that and talk about affordable housing in a broader context. Outside of the HUD settlement, what do you see as the county's role in funding affordable housing in Westchester?
Okay, great question. It gives me an opportunity to expand on the comments I made earlier. Let's look at this really big picture because it's important to put some specific actions in context. We are accustomed to thinking of the American Sun Belt as the population engine of the country. And that's been true for all of our lives. Explosive growth in places like Arizona, Nevada, and Colorado. And by comparison, the Northeast has been relatively stagnant. That's not sustainable. Out in the West, you have aquifers that are drying up. You have river systems with salt levels that are making them useless for agriculture and for drinking water. Can't even support the population that's there right now, let alone any further growth. And all of that's going to be intensified by climate change. Now, here we are, by contrast, in the Northeast, with abundant water and comparatively good mass transit, which means we are built for growth. New York City is projecting 1 million new people by 2030. 1 million. And if you extrapolate that out for Westchester, that's 100 to 150,000 people. So what does that mean? One possibility is this is going to be a total disaster. Gobble up open space, degrade our environment, clog our roads with traffic, overburden our services, undermine the character of communities that we love and want to protect. The other possibility is that it's an amazing opportunity to direct commercial and residential investment to our urban centers that need it most, to encourage growth near mass transit where we can be less reliant on the automobile and have lower per capita greenhouse gas emissions, to demonstrate great climate adaptation strategies, to bring in those young professionals who in turn are magnets for the businesses that we want in our region. So getting this right now, planning for this now, is vitally important to the kind of future we're all going to have. And it is intimately related to exactly the question you posed of where are we going to site the housing that is necessary in order to accomplish and accommodate this growth? And how are we going to ensure that it's accessible to the broadest range of people that we need here in Westchester in order to have a sustainable, strong economy? So I would be as county executive, I would be working closely with municipal leaders who have land use authority in order to work on model zoning codes and comprehensive plans and generic environmental impact statements, not to force anything down anyone's throat, but to provide tools that can be useful for municipalities as they think through their own growth patterns. I'd be using the county's capital budget, not just to replace depreciated assets like a bridge that's about to fall down, although you got to do that, but to think about what strategic investments we could make that will leverage private investment and that will facilitate the kind of growth that we've been discussing. And I think there's an opportunity to partner with the not-for-profit world and with the public education system in order to have a more continuous form of support for students going all the way from early childhood through college and then into careers. So we're thinking about how we really prepare people for the kinds of industries and jobs that we want. It's a complicated, complex set of challenges, but it's really at the heart of what a regional government ought to be doing. And it's exciting and interesting. And the idea that we would not grab this with both hands is frustrating to me. And it's what I'm really eager to do if I get elected.
I'm Janet Langsam, CEO of Arts Westchester, and I live in Armonk. And you just segued into my question. Research shows that the years from birth to age 5 are a critical window for cognitive learning and the acquisition of key social skills linked to success in school and work. What do you see as the role of county government in the availability of affordable, quality early learning and after-school options for our children, youth, and parents?
Thank you, Janet. Well, of course, the key is making sure that those youngsters are exposed to the arts as early as possible. Is that right? Is that right, Janet? So you're 100% right. Every piece of research, every piece of evidence, every piece of scientific analysis tells us that while we want to be concerned with kids and adults at every stage of life, the point at which you can have the greatest impact is those early childhood years. That intervention at that stage really creates opportunities down the road. So it is vitally important that we get it right. And this is one of the issues in which there's quite a clear distinction between myself and my opponent. Westchester used to have what was widely regarded as one of the best child care systems anywhere in America. Scholarships for people at 275 to 300% of poverty, participation in the Title 20 program for people at 200 to 275% of poverty, good level of subsidy for people between 100 and 200% of poverty. There has been an assault on that entire structure over the last few years. The scholarships are gone. The county has withdrawn from the Title 20 program entirely. The county has reduced the subsidies for the lowest income level so that many of these families, in order to hold on to child care, are required to pay thousands of dollars more each year out of pocket. These are families who can least afford it. So I would argue that, A, this is cruel and unfair in its direct human impacts. It violates my own moral sensibility of what a community is all about. But separate and apart from that, these are lousy business decisions. Because what's going to happen? I mean, these are parents who want to work. They want to hold on to a job. They want to be independent. They want to stand on their own 2 feet. Set an example of stability for their own children. A good example. And that's why they need the child care. And many of them, if they can't afford it, are going to end up on welfare instead, which costs all of us more. And as for the youngsters, and this comes back directly to your question, Janet, if they don't have the kind of qualified, appropriate, supportive child care that we know is available and provided by many of the people in this room, they're going to show up in kindergarten less prepared to learn. Their lives are going to be diminished. And we will end up paying more for services K through 12. So there isn't even any fiscal savings associated with these kinds of cuts. And in my estimation, they really spring not from any practical, pragmatic analysis, but just from an ideological predisposition against public action of any kind. This notion that the more people are left to fend for themselves, the better off they're going to be. And the less we do together, the better off we're going to be. And that, to me, doesn't comport with the real world. And I'd rather have a more practical approach to these kinds of questions, which looks at the actual outcomes. So not only would I try to restore the child care supports, I think we can do a lot more to be partnering in order to make sure that there's a smoother transition between early childhood and years of schooling and beyond. And there are examples of other counties that have done this successfully, and I'd like to pursue it here.
Good morning, Bob Miller from West Hab. I live in White Plains. Healthcare is a hot topic these days with the rollout of the healthcare marketplaces. With all the changes, there are still mandates for the county to deliver certain public health services. What's your position on delivering mandated public health services via county-operated clinics versus nonprofit community partners?
Well, let me make a general observation, and then I'll get into the specifics of that question. I know there are some people who automatically assume the public sector is better at doing things, other people who automatically assume the private sector is better at doing things. I don't fall into either one of those camps. I'm sort of very data-driven. I think it's case by case, and in some cases one is better, in some cases the other is better. So I'm always prepared to look at different models and just figure out what works. Having said that, I think the partnership that we've established with neighborhood health centers around the county has really been a very successful one. And many of you will remember that the county historically had operated its own health clinics, and the transition to the use of neighborhood health centers was regarded as a means of delivering these services in a much more efficient and cost-effective fashion. And sure enough, when you look at the examples of health centers around the county, I think they've done a spectacular job. And it's up to the county to uphold its end of the bargain and make sure that through neighborhood health centers we continue to discharge our public health responsibilities. And we're going to have to monitor it carefully as the ACA begins to take effect, because that obviously will change the nature of options that are available to many patients. And we know that healthcare is going through lots of transitions, and we'll have to see where that goes. I'd also say that I think there are untapped opportunities in the County Department of Health to do other things that would promote public health. And I look at the creativity that's been exemplified by the Bloomberg administration in New York City. Not talking necessarily about the soda ban, but other mechanisms that really empower people with information that help them make better choices for healthy lifestyles. And this is not just a public health function, but also a physical planning function. Change our built environment so that we're in a position to, again, engage in healthier practices, whether it's walking or cycling, and being less car dependent. So I think there's a lot of untapped potential for making Westchester a healthier place. And that in turn is not just good for us, it also saves us money.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Hallis. I'm Executive Director of the Child Care Council Westchester, and I live in White Plains. And my question is, research shows that in addition to the benefits to education, youth development, healthy lifestyles, and tourism, the arts had an economic impact in Westchester of $156 million in 2010, up from $120 million 5 years earlier. Research also shows the arts supported 4,800 jobs in Westchester in 2010, up from 3,779 5 years earlier. What would you do to make sure that this arts industry continues to grow?
Great. I think the arts are an intrinsic good. Creative expression is part of what defines us as human beings, and we should celebrate it every opportunity we have. But B, just as you pointed out, it's an economic driver as well. And this isn't rocket science. I think we can all look around and easily see examples of how that's occurring. The arts festivals that have drawn people to different communities, the way the Jacob Burns Center has stimulated a renaissance in Pleasantville, the way Arts Westchester on Mamaroneck Avenue in White Plains has really helped to encourage revival in the area there. We've seen in New Rochelle with our own Arts Fest. It really brings thousands of people to our community. And the whole idea of drawing in a creative class, especially in urban centers that may be struggling, can be a critical part of a revitalization strategy. So I would want to work closely with leaders in the arts community in order to partner with the creation of a cultural plan for Westchester that can look in a multi-layered way at the kinds of changes and improvements we can make in programming and physical installation of public art, integration of art into various public and private developments, event planning. It doesn't require necessarily more money. It just requires coordination and a thoughtful approach to how the arts can supplement what we want to achieve in terms of our public goals. And I think the arts advocates have done a spectacular job of this, and it's now up to the county to reach out and make sure that the hand is grasped as firmly as it can be. Because this is an opportunity for us to really augment what we want to accomplish, and shame on us if we don't take that hand.
Good morning. My name is Judy Dobroff, and I'm the Executive Director of Cancer Support Team, and I live in Mamaroneck. With the shutdown of the federal government, many Americans are dismayed at the inability of our elected officials to reach across party lines and serve the best interests of the people. Similar allegations have been made in Westchester. What will you do to ensure that all voices are heard and to avoid political gridlock in our community?
Okay. I'm going to answer that in two ways. First of all, it has been my nature throughout my time in public life to collaborate, to reach out, to share credit, to share information, to work with people to the greatest degree possible. I don't think we need hyper-partisanship at the local level or the regional level. We understand that there are going to be honest and strongly felt differences of opinion on many different issues. Unanimity ought not to be the standard that we strive for, and we have to be respectful of different opinions, but the key is to not allow disagreement on issue A to bleed into a permanent climate of mistrust that then reshapes issues B, C, and D. And I think there's been an ugly dynamic between the 8th and the 9th floor in county government today, which has not been helpful to anybody. And I hope and believe that the style I would bring to this responsibility would change that dynamic overnight. Now, I'm going to answer this in a slightly different way, and maybe in somewhat stronger terms. By the way, you can probably sense I've been a little bit gentle in drawing contrast. That's because when my opponent isn't actually standing here, I feel like there's almost something impolite about being too tough. But every now and then you have to draw the contrast clearly. I think what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now is a disgrace. A disgrace. And it is tempting for us as citizens to kind of just look at that mess and say, a pox on everybody, they're all at fault. The problem with that is if you don't clearly figure out who's responsible and you just hold everybody responsible, you're actually letting those who are truly responsible off the hook. You're not holding them accountable. And the problem today is that the modern Republican Party is insane. I'm just being very clear about this. Insane. You have an extreme right wing that is detached from reality, that believes there is some moral distinction that makes it impossible to hold on to your principles and at the same time honorably compromise, that was unable to achieve its goals in 2 back-to-back presidential elections, and is now trying to force those goals through legislative maneuvers and is willing to hold the rest of the country hostage in order to achieve those objectives. It is unprecedented in the modern history of our country. Really unbelievable stuff. And I think we all have to open our eyes to that fact and recognize, unfortunately, that that same extreme Tea Party philosophy is finding its way into Westchester County. If you look at the actions and the style of this administration, the perpetual disputes with the federal government over one issue after another, from housing to safe drinking water to transportation, that are costing us millions of dollars in withheld grants, in fees and fines and penalties and legal expenses. If you look at the position on opposition to a woman's right to choose, opposition to gun safety standards, opposition to marriage equality, the administration we have in White Plains right now is the ideological clone of the Tea Party. It's wrong in Washington, D.C. It is wrong for Westchester County, and we ought to be changing it.
No. Thank you very much. And that concludes our 8 questions, but now you have 3 minutes to talk about whatever it is you'd like to say. Thank you.
I don't know that I can really top that last one. I should quit while I'm ahead. Let me say this. It's been really an extraordinary privilege to run for county executive, and an extraordinary privilege for me to serve as mayor of New Rochelle and serve on the council before that. And every time I think about the fact that people have entrusted me and entrusted others in public life with being custodians for their homes and their families and their communities and their neighborhoods, I mean, that's a remarkable thing. And if you don't get up in the morning holding an office like this, trying to figure out how you can use every hour of every day in order to build a better future, you're not doing your job. So I just want you to know that that's the spirit in which I apply myself to my work, that I really care about this, and that I'm running for county executive because I want to accomplish things, not to hold an office, not to move from New Rochelle to White Plains every day, to accomplish things that are important to our region, including things that each of you wrestle with every single day, but also the future of our economy, sharing services to cut taxes, upholding the kind of mainstream values that we just talked about that I think reflect the spirit of Westchester County. That's what I want to do. And I can assure you that if you give me your support, then I will try to uphold your confidence every single day and validate the trust that you've placed in me. It would be an honor to work with each of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming tonight. So thank you all for coming out, and I hope you found this informative. And please go to our website this afternoon and register your comments and ideas. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day.